All right, guys, so coming at you with my top picks for back thickness. And again, some people like to pick on that term as kind of the bro term, but I think most people know what it means. Meaning if we're looking at basically all the stuff that runs along your spine, top to bottom. So for upper back, we're looking at a little bit more stuff that moves your shoulder blades. So some of the muscles that basically are in between, traps, rhomboids, and then some stuff right over top of your shoulder blades. So, you know, that's more of the thickness stuff, including erectors, again, stuff that moves your shoulder blades. And when people say width, I think they really just mean what's a little bit more for lats. So this I would put as my top pick for upper back thickness. And again, main things we're looking at here are going to be traps, rhomboids, and of course rear delts. Some rotator stuff, cuff stuff is absolutely working as well too. The reason I put this as my top pick is if you have a good T-bar row, I like the chest supported for the fact that it takes your hips and your erectors out of the equation as far as limiting factors. And this way you can really just take your upper back for all that it's worth. Aside from that very subtle stuff, I like the fact that it's got some wider handles, so that depends a little bit on your piece of equipment. But again, most T-bar rows have multiple handles. And so again, if the goal is how much can you get your shoulder blades moving, how much range of motion can you have from them, I think a wider handle makes more sense. It doesn't have to be an exact spot, but when you're tucked in, sometimes it limits your range of motion. That can be beneficial for lats. But when you're somewhere kind of up in here, I think tends to be a better position for letting your shoulder blades move a lot. So aside from that, solid setup is just make sure that you're using the chest pad. It's a big mistake is people pull off the chest pad dramatically, in which case you can actually start using your erectors, using your hips. If the goal is upper back, keep some contact point firm and in the same spot the entire time that you're doing some work. And then aside from that, just keep your focus on your shoulder blades. So I always tell people, even if it helps, not that you can see them anyway, but kind of close your eyes and just think, how much can I get my shoulder blades to kind of wrap around my rib cage on that eccentric? How much can you get them to protract? And how far can you pull them back and retract? And just not thinking too much about hands or arms, because again, if the goal is how far back can you get the handles, then ultimately some people start to use biceps and other stuff. So Bryce is gonna hit a working set here. We'll just look at some of that stuff in action. And again, depending on the setup or whatever you've got, just get your body still. So again, whether your feet are on the platform, on the ground, it's gonna be a little different from machine to machine. And you don't have to be in the exact same spot. So some people like it a little bit higher on the chest, some people a little bit lower on the chest. I say just find that contact point and make sure it doesn't move the whole time. Good. You see Bryce has got a nice kind of boat out. So again, not quite that high elbow position, tucked down maybe 10, 15 degrees or so. And again, the focus is purely on how much can you get those shoulder blades moving back and together. Driving elbows back can be a great cue. That'll definitely get the rear delts involved as well, but also great for scapula. Great, come on, Bryce. Good, come on. Good, come on. Go, 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 go. Yeah, I got you, come on. Go, 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 go. Yep. Good. Nice set. So that is my top pick for upper back fitness, chest supported T-bar rows. All right, guys, so my second pick here for back thickness is going to be RDLs. And so again, I would say the main goal of this exercise is to really tax the erectors. So again, not really that much of a upper back exercise. Again, I wouldn't make it a main movement for upper back. It definitely involved as well here too. But again, the main goal here is really to train the erectors. And yes, RDLs are absolutely a lower body exercise as well too. So technically your hips are receiving the most torque. So there's the most force production required from, you know, hams, glutes, adductors, stuff that extends your hips. But again, the next joint in line right after your hip is obviously the first vertebra, you know, basically where it attaches to your pelvis, and all those vertebrae on their way up are joints. So again, your erectors are performing a strong isometric the whole exercise. And so again, typically, depending on someone's programming, I might put this on its own day, separate from a leg day, just so you're not double down on the spine. But obviously you could put these on a leg day as well too. I don't honestly think it's that big of a deal. Just program whichever makes the most sense. And again, the real goal as far as erectors, top to bottom. So literally I consider an erector everything that runs along your spine, all the way up to the base of your skull pretty much. All of that is being pulled into flexion. So by you maintaining a fixed spine or a neutral spine, all those muscles have to work again to keep you from pulling into that flex position. So Bryce is gonna hit some reps here. I'll talk through a little bit. The best cue here that I can give most people is to think hips back and forward as opposed to up and down. And if you really have a range of motion goal, think about the angle of your spine relative to the ground. So where you're gonna have the most force from your vertebra, excuse me, from all the muscles that run along your vertebra, are when your whole spine is close to parallel to the ground. Now, not everyone can get there, but that is the position basically where those muscles are going to have to work the most. So again, if you just think about driving your hips back, and basically just stopping to the position where your hips no longer flex and your spine starts to flex, and that is the end of the range. And people need to realize where the plates end up relative to the ground has just as much to do with arm and leg length as it does with how much range of motion you have at the hips. So you can see Bryce, he's pretty much to that point where his spine is at least close to, if not actually at, parallel to the ground. So he's getting a ton of force on his erectors. And again, he's just to the point where the plates are whatever, 4 or 5 inches or so off the ground. And again, just realize if his legs were 4 or 5 inches shorter, those plates would be touching the ground. Or if someone had very long arms relative to their legs, the same thing would be true. So again, where those plates end up relative to the ground is going to be very individual dependent. And I would say don't focus on that nearly as much as where your hips end up and again, where your spine ends up relative to the ground. And if you can't get to the point where your spine is actually parallel to the ground, just don't worry about it. Get as close as you possibly can. And again, it's just worth saying, absolutely, there's other great exercises for erectors. Isolated spinal flexion extension, like in a 45-degree, low back extension bench is also a great option. But some of it, I look at anecdotal evidence here as well too, where again, you can argue what on paper makes the most sense, but what I've actually seen in the gyms, and we have tons of people in all various populations, that again, if you get very good at this exercise from a form standpoint and you get very strong at this exercise, you're going to have some very, very thick erectors. So that's why it's my second pick for thickness type stuff. And again, looking not so much at upper back here, but looking at, again, everything that runs along your spine. All right, guys, so to round out my top 3 favorite picks for back thickness, it's going to be a tie. And basically because I feel like those first 2 are definitively my favorite from different types of evidence. So again, what kind of makes sense on paper, and then obviously what makes sense actually of what I've seen in the gym produce results. I feel like those need to be 2 staples in most everyone's workout to some degree. And the ones that I'm going to basically have a tie for my third pick is going to be pretty much any bent over row variation and any pretty much low back extension variation, particularly like a 45-degree low back extension. And the reason for that is I would put the edge of a chest supported row over, again, a bent over row, just for the reason that you can take your hips and your spine out of it. Now that being said, accessibility kind of weighs in here. So meaning not everybody has a good chest supported row, and obviously bent over row variations can work very well too. And so the realization here is basically any bent over row variation is pretty much the same motion. So whether it's a bent over dumbbell row like you guys are going to see, or a bent over barbell row, or a bent over T-bar row, it's pretty much all basically the same motion. I think the thing that's most important is basically that you have a wider grip that allows for an arm path that travels very similar to, like I said, in the chest supported T-bar row. So again, just something that allows you to take a little bit wider out here and let your arms move very comfortably and drive your elbows as far back as you can, which again in turn should let your shoulder blades and scapula move as much as possible. And so again, if I would give a slight edge to something, I like bent over dumbbell rows just for the reason that you can take whatever grip you want and you can have whatever arm path you want. Again, bent over barbell rows, if the goal is upper back, I prefer an overhand grip. Again, that underhand grip, a lot of people, it doesn't fit well. I think you could potentially be putting yourself at a risk for a bicep injury if it doesn't fit you well. And then in general, that overhand grip allows that upper arm to travel out more. And then the same with a T-bar row. Again, if the goal is upper back, I just prefer a wider grip, whether it's a wide neutral grip or a wide overhand grip. I think those are going to be better options. So again, premise of all this stuff and all the movements I'm going to show, and again with the low back extension as well too, is again a great erector option. And again, the advantage of that over potentially maybe an RDL is you take your hips out of the equation. So again, if you see how I'm doing those there, basically you just want that hip pad up high enough that it's blocking your hips. So pretty much the only thing that can move is your spine, spinal flexion extension, not hip flexion and extension. So again, it's one of those things where again, I like to do these lists to give you an idea of a great place to start. Maybe what would you prioritize within your programming? But the reason I like to have kind of a tie for the third here and still always mention other exercises is it's not to imply that anything else is bad or that you shouldn't do them. It's just basically my direction for what I think is a very good place to start. Again, for the goal of training and building back thickness, erectors, upper back stuff. So as always, if you enjoy, give me some little likes, some thumbs up, some subscribes, tell your grandma she's looking pretty frail. And until the next time, please leave your feedback, comments, and all that good stuff below.